You have been convinced that one person turned wild steppe and swamps into cities with ancient architecture in just a couple of years. But once you take a calculator and calculate the volume of earthworks, the official history crumbles to dust. Who actually designed these cities long before Peter's birth? Why do the temples have entrances sunken into the ground, as if after a global catastrophe? And where did the civilization go that possessed the technologies of star forts throughout southern Russia? The main question is, are we looking at a new construction or the ruins of an ancient empire that have just been uncovered? You are told that St. Petersburg is a window to Europe, a great city built on swamps by the genius of Peter. But open any textbook on geopolitics and answer one simple question. Why is the capital of a state placed on the very edge, at the border, where it can be captured by an enemy within the first days of war? Look at the map of Russia. Not the modern one, but the map of the 18th century. Where are the key points of the empire located? Kazan in the east, the gateway to Siberia. Astrakhan in the south, control over the Volga and the Caspian Sea. Crimea, even further south, access to the Black Sea. The Urals, an industrial spine, metals and ores. Kiev, a western outpost. Arkhangelsk, northern trade. And now take a ruler and measure the distances from Petersburg to Kazan, 1,100 kilometers in a straight line. In practice, taking into account the roads of that time, a full 1,500. A courier rides an average of 100 kilometers a day, changing horses at stations. So, a message from Petersburg to Kazan takes 15 days. There and back, a month. If troops need to be urgently moved, add another 2 months for the march. During that time, anything can happen at the border. From St. Petersburg to Astrakhan in a straight line is 1,800 kilometers. By roads, it's over 2,000. 2 months for delivering a message. 4 months for troop deployment. 6 months round trip. This is not management. It's a game of broken telephone across half the empire. From St. Petersburg to Crimea is 1,500 kilometers. To the Caucasus, it's 2,000. Imagine, a conflict breaks out at the border, and the capital learns about it a month and a half later. It takes another 3 months to bring in reinforcements. In that time, a war can be lost. And now take a look at Voronezh. It is not on the outskirts, nor by the sea. It stands in the center, at the crossroads of the main rivers. From Voronezh to Kazan is 700 kilometers. A week for a messenger. 2 weeks round trip. From Voronezh to Astrakhan via the Don and Volga is 800 kilometers. But by water, it's faster than on land. 10 days. From Voronezh to Crimea is 600 kilometers. 5 days for a messenger. To the Urals, it's 1,200. Half the distance from Petersburg. It's not just more convenient. It's twice as fast, twice as efficient, twice as much control. From here, one can manage an empire. From here, all edges are visible at once. From here, one can keep a finger on the pulse of the south, the east, and the center. Any military strategist will tell you, a capital is placed where it is protected and from where it can control the maximum territory. Petersburg is not protected by anything. Swamps are not a barrier for an army with pontoons. The Gulf of Finland freezes in winter, and one can walk over the ice. The only defense is the fleet. But the fleet is useless for 6 months of the year when the sea is icebound. Voronezh is protected by its distance from all borders. The nearest border with Sweden is 1,500 kilometers away. The Turkish lands are 800 kilometers away. The Polish border is 1,000 kilometers distant. To reach Voronezh, an enemy army would need to pass through dozens of fortified cities, cross rivers, and drag artillery through muddy roads. This is months of marching through hostile territory. And Petersburg? The Swedish fleet can reach the city in 2 days. They can land troops right at the fortress, capture the capital before reinforcements arrive from the central provinces. This is exactly how they operate when seizing colonies. They establish the capital by the sea, making it easy to supply the metropolis and allowing for a swift evacuation by ships in case of an uprising. At first glance, it seems that Petersburg was needed for the navy, for access to the Baltic. And that sounds logical, until you look at one detail. Peter first built the fleet in Voronezh. Not in Petersburg, in Voronezh. On the Don River, thousands of kilometers away from the Baltic. In the year 1700, a large iron clock with 5 striking bells was installed on a tower in Voronezh. These were the first public clocks in all of Russia. Not in Moscow, not in future St. Petersburg, in Voronezh. Do you understand what this means? The public clock in the city of that time was not just a device for measuring time. It was a symbol. It was a statement. The clock struck every hour, calling the people to the square, regulating the life of the city to a single rhythm. Its sound could be heard from kilometers away. It cost a fortune. The mechanism was ordered from abroad, delivered over the course of months, and installed by specially trained craftsmen. Such clocks were only installed in capitals or in cities preparing for capital status. Moscow received its chimes later. St. Petersburg didn't even exist yet. Meanwhile, in Voronezh, 5 bells were already ringing, marking the time of a new era. This was a signal for the entire country. Here would be the center of power. And not just the clocks. The diocese is moving here. The church administration for a vast region. The bishop is not merely relocating from one city to another. This decision is made at the highest level. It signifies that the city is becoming a spiritual center. And where there is a spiritual center, the political one is not far behind. An admiralty is being built here, not a shipyard for repairing boats. The admiralty is the command body of the fleet, headquarter, the place from where naval operations are directed. An admiralty is built where a fleet is planned to be based permanently. This is not a temporary anchorage. This is a base. Shipyards are being established here for the construction of ships. Not just one shipyard, but several, with hangars, docks, timber warehouses, forges, and rope workshops. This is a complete production cycle, from log to finished ship. Such infrastructure is built for decades to come. The entire city is being renovated in a European style. Straight streets instead of winding alleys, stone buildings instead of wooden huts, a wide embankment along the river, squares with fountains, administrative buildings in a style that will later be called Peter's Baroque. This is not a reconstruction of a provincial town. This is the creation of a capital, from scratch, according to a plan, with investments that will only pay off if the city truly becomes the center of the state. And then, nothing. As if someone flicked a switch. Peter leaves for the north, founds Petersburg on the swamps, and Voronezh is simply forgotten. The shipyards empty out. The diocese departs. The city gradually becomes a province. Why? What happened? If Voronezh was the ideal location for the southern capital, if it had everything necessary, why abandon a ready project and start from scratch in the swamps? To answer this question, one must return to the very fleet that Peter built in Voronezh, because this fleet is associated with one peculiarity that historians prefer to avoid. So, Peter is building a fleet in Voronezh for a campaign to Azov, the fortress at the mouth of the Don, which is controlled by the Turks. Official history tells us it was necessary to capture Azov in order to gain access to the Sea of Azov. Make sense? Let's check it now. Open the map. From Voronezh to Azov along the Don River, it's over 500 kilometers. A winding river, rapids, shallows, and cascades. A whole fleet needs to be floated down this river. Now, take a look at another route. From Taganrog to Azov in a straight line, 50 kilometers, by sea, no rapids or shallows. Anyone who has ever launched a boat into the water will understand the absurdity of the situation. But it's not even about the distance. It's about the kind of ships Peter built. River vessels and sea ships are two completely different constructions, and the difference is not in size. The difference lies in physics. A river vessel has a flat bottom. Why? Because the river is shallow. If the vessel has a deep draft, it will run aground at the first rapid. A flat bottom allows it to navigate shallow waters, bypass sandbanks, and pass through areas where the depth is less than a meter. The hull of the river vessel is lightweight. The sides are thin. There are minimal beams in the framework. Why? Because there are no waves in the river. At most, there's a slight ripple from the wind. The water is calm. It's possible to save on strength and make the vessel fast and maneuverable. A marine ship is a different kind of engineering. It has a deep draft. The keel extends several meters down. Why? For stability. When a wave hits from the side, the ship tilts. A deep keel acts as a counterweight, preventing it from capsizing. Without a keel, a ship can overturn in a storm in a minute. The hull of a sea vessel is a reinforced structure, thick sides, a frequent arrangement of frames, ribs of rigidity, longitudinal stringers running along the entire hull, deck beams that connect the sides to each other. All of this is necessary to withstand the impacts of the waves. Because a wave is not just water, it's tons of pressure. When a vessel sails through a storm, waves pound against the hull with a force of tens of tons per square meter. If the hull isn't designed to handle this, it breaks, literally snaps in half. The bow and stern rise on the crests of different waves, while the middle hangs in the air, and the hull cannot withstand the bending. The hull curvature of a river vessel is designed for calm water. The height difference between the bow and stern is a maximum of a few centimeters. In a sea ship, the curvature can reach a meter or more, and the hull must endure this without cracking. Peter built galleys in Voronezh. These are flat-bottomed vessels up to 30 meters long, with 2 rows of oars on each side. A slender hull, shallow draft, lightweight construction, perfect for rivers, deadly dangerous for the sea. He was building fire ships, small vessels packed with flammable materials intended to set enemy ships ablaze. Once again, a riverine design, flat-bottomed, light construction. These ships could reach Azov via the Don. They would float downstream, following the current while avoiding shallows. The Don River at the end of the 17th century was fuller than it is now. It was possible to travel this way, but it took weeks. And use them in the Sea of Azov to fight against the Turkish fleet? The Turks sailed on galleasses, reinforced galleys with high sides and artillery, on heavy warships. Their hulls were designed for ocean waves. They could ram, engage in artillery fire, and withstand storms. The river galleys of Peter against them are like stepping into the ring in a cardboard box instead of with proper protection. One wave hit and the hull cracks. 2 hits and it starts to leak. 3 hits and the vessel sinks. This is not an exaggeration. It is an engineering reality. Anyone who has worked in shipbuilding will confirm, river and sea vessels are different classes. They cannot be confused. River vessels do not operate at sea. Sea vessels run aground in rivers. And Peter knew this. He had trained in Holland. He worked at shipyards. He had seen both river barges and sea frigates. He understood the difference. But he built a river fleet for the campaign against the sea fortress. Officially, it's explained like this. Peter simply didn't know, made a mistake in his calculations, lacked experience. A young czar, his first experience in shipbuilding. It's forgivable. Fine. Then explain why, after the first unsuccessful attempt to take Azov, he builds exactly the same river fleet a second time. If a person burns themselves on a hot stove, they won't go near it again. If a fleet is unsuitable for naval combat, its design is changed. But Peter builds the same galleys, the same flat-bottomed ships. And with the second fleet, he sets out for Azov once more. And then something interesting happens. Azov was taken, but not from the sea, from the land. A siege, artillery, an assault. The fleet was positioned at the mouth of the Don and simply blocked access, preventing the Turks from bringing reinforcements by water. It served as a floating barrier. For this, naval ships are not needed. River barges are enough. So, the fleet was not needed for battle. It was needed for demonstration. But for whom? The Turks could see very clearly that these galleys were helpless in open waters. The European powers also understood the difference between a river fleet and a naval fleet. There is only one version left. The demonstration was for those who did not understand shipbuilding, for those who needed to be shown that Peter was a great reformer, a builder of the fleet, a conqueror of the Turks, for the history that was written later. After the capture of Azov, Peter establishes a port. And here begins the truly strange part. He does not build the port in Azov, where it would make sense, where they just won, where there is a ready fortress. Instead, he lays it down in Taganrog, 50 kilometers away from Azov, in an empty place. That's what we are told. But the name of the city is Taganrog, not Petrograd, not Novoazovsk, not Petrovsk-on-Don. Taganrog. It is not a Russian word. It is not German, which Peter cherished so much. It is a Turkic name. Look at the cities officially founded by Peter the Great. St. Petersburg, a German name in honor of the patron saint. Petrozavodsk, Peter's factory. Yekaterinburg, named after his wife Catherine, again with a German ending. All new cities from that era were given either the name of the Tsar or a European name. Tagan is a metal tripod on which nomads cooked food over a fire. Horn is a cape, a land projection into the sea. Taganrog, Cauldron Cape, a strange name for a city founded by a czar dreaming of making Russia resemble Holland. If Peter had truly founded a new city from scratch, he would have named it Port Azov, or Petroglyphin in German, or at least New Azov. But Taganrog? That name can only be given to a city that already has an established local name, a name that cannot simply be taken away or canceled because it has become rooted. Okay, let's assume that Peter decided to keep the local name, out of respect for traditions or simply for practical reasons. But that means the city already existed, and it had existed long enough to have not just a name, but a very specific one that indicates the function of the place. And now let's take a look at another detail. There was a star-shaped bastion in Taganrog. Do you know how long it takes to build such a fortress? The star-shaped bastion is not just a wall around the perimeter. It is a complex geometric system where every angle is mathematically calculated. Imagine 5 or 6 triangular projections radiating from the center like the rays of a star. Each projection is a bastion. Between the bastions are curtains, straight sections of wall. In front of the wall is a ditch up to 10 meters deep. Behind the ditch is a glacis, a gentle slope where cannonballs bounce without causing harm. Between the bastions, in the corners, ravelins are constructed, separate fortifications that shield the walls from direct fire. A counterscarp is placed beyond the moat, an additional wall from which flanking fire is directed. All of this is connected by underground passages, ventilation shafts, and casemates for storing gunpowder. Why such complexity? Because the geometry of the star allows for crossfire. The enemy cannot approach the wall without being targeted from 2 bastions at once. There are no dead zones. Every point in front of the fortress is in the line of fire. The artillery on the bastions can fire in any direction, but building something like that takes years of work. First, a design is needed. An engineer calculates angles, distances, and heights. An error of a degree, and the crossfire system won't work. The blueprints are made over the course of months. Then the earthworks begin. A ditch needs to be dug around the entire perimeter of the fortress. If the perimeter is a kilometer, and the ditch is 10 meters deep and 20 meters wide, then 200,000 cubic meters of soil must be excavated. With shovels, by hand. The soil is transported out by wheelbarrows. Thousands of workers dig for months. The excavated earth needs to be disposed of somewhere. Part goes to the embankment of the glacis. Part is used for building up the earthworks outside the walls. Nothing goes to waste, but everything needs to be moved, compacted, and reinforced. Then they build walls. It's not just laying bricks. The foundation of the wall must be below the bottom of the ditch, so that the enemy cannot undermine it. The foundation is laid to a depth of up to 5 meters. The stone is brought from afar. There is none in the steppe. Each stone is carved and adjusted. The masonry is angled so that cannonballs bounce off rather than breach the wall. The height of the walls is up to 12 meters. The thickness at the base is up to 8 meters. This is not an exaggeration. Such thickness is necessary to withstand the artillery fire of siege weapons. Thin walls are breached through. Inside the walls, casemates are arranged, rooms for storing ammunition, provisions, and housing the garrison. The ceilings of the casemates are made of brick, vaulted with arches. Each casemate represents weeks of work for stonemasons. Artillery is being set up on the bastions. The cannons weigh tons. They need to be raised onto the ramparts, secured, and provided with a firing sector. For this, ramps are constructed, gentle roads along which the cannons are hauled using pulleys and winches. All of this, given the availability of ready-made blueprints, experienced engineers, unlimited resources, and thousands of workers, takes a minimum of 5 years. More often, it takes 10. The fortress in St. Petersburg, Peter and Paul, took 20 years to build. And this is considering that materials were transported there from all over the country. Peter captured Azov in 1696. Officially, Taganrog was founded that same year, in the autumn of 1696. So, does that mean they built a star-shaped fortress there over the winter, in just a few months? In a steppe where there are no forests for timber, no stone for walls, and no skilled craftsmen? It is technically impossible. Even if you throw 10,000 people at the construction site, even if they work around the clock, you can only dig a trench and start laying the foundation over the winter. No more than that. But by the spring of 1697, when Peter solemnly declares Taganrog to be a port and fortress, there are already fortifications in place. Bastions, casemates, walls. The conclusion is clear. The fortress was already standing. It wasn't built, it was occupied. Perhaps it was partially destroyed after battles, or maybe it was abandoned by its previous owners after a catastrophe. But the main structures were there. They just repaired them and attributed the construction to Peter. And this is not the only case. Take a closer look at the map of Russia. City by city, which are officially founded by Peter, actually bear traces of more ancient structures. Fortresses that could not have been built in the time frames specified in the documents. Names that do not match the naming style of Peter. Peter did not build new cities. He captured existing ones and integrated them into a new history. He claimed them as his own. He changed their names. He rewrote the chronicles. Thus, the purpose of the Azov campaigns was not at all to wage war with Turkey. The goal was to seize the existing ports of southern civilization, the one that already controlled the outlets to the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, the one that built Taganrog, Azov, and dozens of other cities with star-shaped fortresses. And now the main question that historians shy away from like the devil from holy water. If these cities already existed, who built them? Where is the civilization that erected the star-shaped bastions in southern Russia? Why is it absent from the official timeline? And most importantly, where have these builders gone? To understand this, one must pay attention to a specific date, the year 1700. This date marks a turning point. After it, everything changes. Remember this number, 1700. From this moment on, Russia becomes different. Suddenly, synchronously, upon command. Open any history textbook and look at the list of reforms by Peter the Great. They are all dated to the same year, 1700. Not stretched over a decade, not introduced gradually, everything at once. in a barrage, within 12 months. On January 1st, 1700, Peter issued a decree introducing a new calendar. Instead of the year 7208 from the creation of the world, it became the year 1700 from the birth of Christ. Minus 5,500 years, simply erased. All history before Christ officially does not exist in the new calendar. It's not just a replacement of numbers on documents. It's a rewriting of the entire chronology. We need to recalculate the dates of all events: birth dates, reign dates of kings, dates of wars, treaties, temple constructions. Every chronicle, every charter, every entry in the church book, everything needs to be converted to the new system. Imagine the scale of the work. In every city, there is an archive. In every monastery, there is a library. In every church, there are metric books. These are thousands of documents. They need to be found, copied, and rebound. This will take medieval scribes years. But Peter is doing it by decree. On the 1st of January, from tomorrow, a new calendar. Without preparation, without a transition period. In that same year, a decree is issued regarding the shaving of beards. A beard in Russia is not just hair on the face, it is a symbol of wisdom, dignity, and a connection to ancestors. Church canon states that the image of God includes a beard. It cannot be shaved under the threat of excommunication from the church. And Peter orders shaving for everyone, from the nobleman to the merchant. Those who refuse will pay a tax, a huge tax, one that is ruinous. Essentially, it's a ban on beards under economic pressure. This is not just a change in fashion. It is a break in religious identity. It is about forcing a person to violate church canon under the threat of devastation. How much time is needed to prepare society for this? To conduct an explanatory campaign among the clergy. To ensure that people accept it not as violence, but as a necessity. Years. But Peter does it in a week. The decree is out. Tomorrow, everyone is shaved. Edict on wearing European clothing. No more long caftans. No more fur coats with long sleeves. No more old-fashioned hats. Everyone must wear short coats in German fashion, short trousers, stockings, shoes with buckles. Creating new clothing takes time, fabric, tailors who know how to sew in new ways. Transitioning from one style of clothing to another typically takes decades under normal conditions. Fashion changes slowly because people wear what they have until it's worn out. And Peter orders a change of clothes within a month. Soldiers stand at the gates of Moscow. They check the clothing of those entering. Anyone in an old caftan must either pay a fine or a soldier will cut off the sleeves with scissors right in the street. Table of ranks. A new system of ranks for the army and civil service. 14 classes, from collegiate registrar to chancellor. New job titles. New rules for promotion. No more system of service ranks determined by lineage, now solely based on merit and years of service. This is a global reform that affects every nobleman, every official, every officer. It's not enough to just issue a decree. We need to create tables of correspondence between old positions and new ones. We must reassign thousands of people to new roles. We need to teach them to work according to the new rules. In a normal country, this takes years. Drafting the bill. Discussion in the government. Pilot launch in several regions. Correction of errors. And only then, full implementation. Peter does this in 1 day. He signed the decree. Starting from tomorrow, we will work differently. Army reform. Introduction of conscription. Previously, wars were fought by volunteers or noble militias. Now, the state takes 1 man from every 20 households, forever, for 25 years of service, which effectively means for life. This affects every village, every family. A population accounting system needs to be established. New recruits need to be trained. Barracks need to be built. They need to be supplied with weapons, uniforms, and provisions. An officer corps needs to be created. In Europe, it took decades to establish a regular army. Prussia took 50 years to form its army. Sweden, 30. Yet Peter announces a recruitment drive in the year 1700, and by the following year, he is already sending the recruits into battle. New flag. A white, blue, red tricolor instead of the old banners with the 2-headed eagle. New coat of arms. A 2-headed eagle with 3 crowns and scepters. A new state seal. New coins with new images. Each of these changes involves months of preparation, production, and implementation. Flags need to be sewn for each regiment. Emblems must be carved in stone for every government building. Coins need to be minted by the millions. Yet all of this emerges in the year 1700. At the same time, try to conduct such an experiment right now, in modern Russia. Imagine that you need to change the calendar. Transition from the Gregorian calendar to, say, a solar calendar, where there are 12 months of 30 days each. How much time will be needed just for the project preparation? Convene a commission of experts. Calculate how this will affect accounting, taxes, contracts, and payment timelines. Draft new laws. Develop methodological guidelines for organizations. Conduct an informational campaign so that the population understands how to use the new calendar. At least 3 years for preparation, then a year for a pilot launch. After that, another 2 years for a full transition, taking corrections into account. In total, 5 years. And this is in the 21st century, with computers and the internet. And Peter does this in the 17th century. In 1 day, the decree is signed. From tomorrow, a new calendar. This is impossible. It can only be done if the country is already prepared. If the reforms actually started earlier but were kept secret. If there is existing infrastructure, trained personnel, and ready plans. Or if it's not reforms at all, but occupation. When the invaders come with a ready-made system and forcibly impose it, breaking the resistance of the population. And here it becomes clear why all the reforms are aimed at one thing: to erase the memory of the old. Beards? They are not just hair. They are a connection between generations. Grandfather, father, son, all wore beards. It's a visual continuity. When you shave off your beard, you break that connection. You no longer look like your grandfather. You are different. Clothing? It's not just fabric. It's a cultural code. A long caftan was sewn according to specific rules. The ornament on the sleeves had meaning. The color indicated status. When you change into a European coat, you erase that code. You start to resemble a German, a Frenchman, anyone but a Russian. Calendar? It's not about dates, it's a chronology. The calendar, since the creation of the world, connected people with biblical history, with 7 millennia of an uninterrupted line of events. When you discard 5,000 years, you sever people from their roots. Now history begins with Christ. What was before that? It doesn't matter. Forget it. Peter is not modernizing, he is erasing. Everything that reminded him of the past life, of how things used to be, must disappear. Old books are being removed from the monasteries. Chronicles that describe events according to the old calendar are being rewritten. Church services are changing. The names of saints are being replaced with their European equivalents. This is a cleanup, a memory wipe, deleting files from the hard drive of history. And now, look at what is happening in the year 1700, not only in Russia. Denmark attacks Holstein and captures it. Saxony forms an alliance with Russia against Sweden. Sweden begins the Great Northern War. Poland is disintegrating into parts. All of Eastern Europe is in motion. Wars, alliances, redrawing of borders. And all of this happens in sync. As if the conductor raised his baton and the entire orchestra played the same melody. Coincidence? Then explain why the reforms in these countries follow the same pattern. The table of ranks that Peter introduced in Russia is copied directly from the Danish model, 100%. Even the names of the positions are translated directly. The military reform is modeled after the Swedish example. The Navy follows the Dutch model. The administrative division is based on the German system. These are not reforms of a single genius king. This is a synchronized operation to reformat all of Eastern Europe. Someone is giving the orders, and the countries start to change simultaneously, according to one plan, with one goal: to erase the old and implement the new. The most frightening thing is the rumors about the replacement of Peter. The official history dismisses them as conspiracy theories. But let's take a look at the facts. In the year 1697, Peter set off on the Grand Embassy across Europe. The official version: he went to study shipbuilding and establish alliances against Turkey. Incognito, under the name of the clerk Peter Mikhailov, a king disguised as a simple soldier, a beautiful legend. He leaves in March 1997. He returns in August 1998. A year and a half abroad. Holland, England, Germany, Vienna, Venice. The itinerary is documented. Meetings with kings, negotiations, work at shipyards. But when he returns, his loved ones do not recognize him. Literally. His mother, Queen Natalia Kirillovna, stares at him for a long time when they meet. Then she cries. His contemporaries write that it seems he is not her son. His wife, Evdokia Lopukina, recoils from him as if he were a stranger. A month later, Peter sends her to a convent. Officially, it's for political intrigues. But what if she simply refused to acknowledge him as her husband? Old friends, comrades of youth, those with whom Peter participated in humorous military exercises, suddenly become strangers. Some of them are arrested on charges of conspiracy among the archers. They are executed. The others quietly disappear from the horizon. New confidants emerge: foreigners, Germans, Dutch, Scots. Peter spoke Russian before the trip. Well, fluently. He didn't shine in literacy, but he communicated normally. After returning, he often demands a translator, even for conversations in Russian. They officially explain, Peter got so accustomed to foreign languages that he's forgotten Russian. Forgotten his native language in a year and a half? Seriously? Handwriting. This can be verified through documents. Look at Peter's signatures before 1697. Capital letters, a firm hand, a characteristic flourish. And after 1698, a different handwriting. The letters are smaller. The slant is different. The flourish has changed. Graphologists say, this is not one hand. Historians claim that Peter learned to write in a European style, which changed his writing manner. However, handwriting is like fingerprints. It is formed in childhood and does not change drastically in adulthood. One can master calligraphy, but the basic movements of the wrist, pressure and tilt, these all remain. And there are no coincidences here. Height. Contemporaries describe Peter before the trip as tall, but not giant-sized. After the trip, everyone unanimously remarks, he is extraordinarily tall, nearly 2 meters 10, taller than anyone in the crowd. Did he grow 10 centimeters in a year and a half? At 25 years old? When growth had long since stopped? Face. In the portraits of Peter before the trip, one face. After the trip, another. The shape of the nose is different. The line of the chin. The shape of the eyes. Artists write, the features have changed due to maturity and concerns, but the nose doesn't change from worries. The structure of the facial bones remains unchanged. Moles. Peter had a large mole on his left cheek before the trip. This is documented, and there are witnesses. After the trip, the mole is not mentioned. Where did it go? Did it fall off due to the European climate? Memory. Peter, after his return, cannot remember the layout of the rooms in the Kremlin Palace. He gets confused in the corridors. He has gotten lost several times. The palace where he grew up, where he lived for 20 years, and suddenly he does not remember where his chambers are. The official explanation: he hasn't been there in a long time. He forgot. Has he really forgotten the way to his own bedroom in a year and a half? Habits. Before the trip, Pyotr did not drink strong alcohol. It's documented. At feasts, he drank diluted wine. After returning, a binge alcoholic. He drinks vodka by the liters. He forces his subjects to drink until they lose consciousness at assemblies. Has an addiction formed in a year and a half? Or is this simply a different person with different habits? Attitude towards the church. Before the trip, Peter was a believer. Not fanatically, but he regularly attended services, observed fasts, and confessed. After returning, mockery of the church. A universal gestures council parodying religious services. Drunken orgies in robes. The appointment of royal jesters as patriarchs. This is not a change of character. This is a 180-degree turn in worldview. There is no documentary evidence of falsification. Everything has been meticulously covered up. Those who could have known the truth either died under mysterious circumstances or fell silent. The chronicles of that period have been rewritten. The originals have disappeared. But there are too many indirect clues, too many oddities. The changes in Peter's behavior match too perfectly with European plans for the reform of Russia. If the substitution really took place, then the year 1700 is the moment when the new Peter was given a carte blanche, the moment when the operation to cleanse old Russia entered its active phase. And Voronezh found itself at the very center of this operation. Because this city was not just a convenient place for the capital, it was something more. When you look at the map of Voronezh from the 18th century and the map of St. Petersburg next to it, a strange feeling of déjà vu arises. You've seen this before. Voronezh. Straight streets radiating from the central square. This is not a medieval layout where streets twist with the terrain. This is geometry, a ruler and compass. Someone drew a plan on paper and then superimposed it onto the landscape. The angle between the streets is precise. The distances are calculated. Stone buildings with arched windows. It's not Russian architecture of the 17th century with its towers and turrets. This is European style. Strict facades, symmetry, pilasters at the corners, cornices, balustrades, Dutch influence, Italian motifs, a river embankment, not just a shore where boats dock, a cobbled stone promenade with a parapet, a straight line along the water, lamps on poles at regular intervals, benches. This is a promenade, a place for walks, a European tradition. Squares, not chaotic patches where streets meet, rectangular or circular squares integrated into the city's layout. In the squares, fountains, not wells for water, decorative fountains with statues. This is a sign of wealth and high status of the city. Administrative buildings, town hall, magistrate, exchange. Such buildings are constructed in commercial centers, in cities where active commerce takes place, in places where merchants gather from all corners, not in a provincial outpost on the border. And now open the map of St. Petersburg. You will see the same thing, straight avenues. Nevsky diverges like rays onto canals and streets, geometry, exact angles, European planning. Stone buildings with arched windows, Dutch style, Italian architects. Embankments along the Neva and the canals, paved with stone, with parapets and lanterns. Squares, Palace Square, Senate Square, seamlessly integrated into the plan. Fountains in Peterhof, administrative buildings, the Admiralty, the 12 colleges, the Menshikov Palace. St. Petersburg is Voronezh on an enlarged scale. The same principles of planning, the same architectural techniques. Even the materials are similar. White and red stone, plaster, iron for grills and lanterns. If an architect has a project that works well, they scale it up. First, they build a small structure. They observe the results, identifying where issues arise and what needs fixing. Then, they construct a larger project, taking into account the lessons learned from the first one. Voronezh was the first object of its kind, a testing ground, a city where the technology of transforming a Russian city into a European one was being tested. They observed how much it would cost, how much time it would take, how the population would react, and what challenges would arise. And importantly, they practiced the technology of construction on the buried city. Because Petersburg was also built not on empty ground. There used to be a city there. It was buried. And on the buried ruins, they erected a new capital. To rebuild the city according to a European plan, the old structures must be demolished. This is obvious. A medieval city consists of winding streets, houses of varying sizes, and churches located wherever there was space. It's impossible to simply draw a straight street through this chaos. The houses obstruct, the churches obstruct, the cemeteries obstruct. Everything needs to be demolished. The site must be leveled and rebuild according to the plan. But tearing down a city is a colossal task. Dismantling thousands of houses, removing thousands of tons of construction debris, compensating residents for the loss of their homes, relocating them for the duration of the construction. This takes years and enormous amounts of money. There are no mentions in the documents of the 18th century about the mass demolition of buildings in Voronezh during Peter's time. There are no complaints from residents about their homes being destroyed. There are no orders for the allocation of funds for compensation. There are no records of the resettlement of the fire victims. Nothing. The only recorded mass construction is the building of new structures, shipyards, admiralties, administrative offices, housing for officers and officials. But there's silence regarding the demolition of the old. Where did the straight streets come from then? How were they constructed through the existing city without demolition? The most obvious explanation is that there was no old city. There was just a vacant lot, perhaps with remnants of foundations, with buried basements, but without any standing houses or residents. And on this vacant lot, they built from scratch. But if this is a wasteland, why did it have a name? Voronezh. This name appears in documents long before Peter. In the chronicles of the 16th century, Voronezh is mentioned as an existing settlement, as a fortress, as a watchpost. There is a contradiction. On one hand, the city exists in the documents. On the other hand, there are no signs of demolition at the site of the old city, but there is new construction. How is this possible? Only if a catastrophe occurred between these two events. The city stood, then it was buried, completely or partially. The inhabitants either perished or left. The city became deserted, and on the buried ruins, a new one began to be built. This is exactly what explains the Assumption Cathedral with its submerged first floor. It was built in the late 16th century. It stood on a high riverbank. Then a catastrophe occurred, a mud flow, a debris flow, something that brought several meters of clay soil. The cathedral was buried up to the first floor windows, and when the city began to be restored, they simply leveled the surface to the new height and continued to use what had survived. The first floor has turned into a basement. The windows have become ventilation ducts. A door was punched through the wall of the second floor at ground level. Quickly, cheaply. There's no need to dig through meters of earth. And so it went throughout the city. Old buildings that partially survived were used as foundations for new ones. The buried streets were ignored. New ones were laid right over them. The buried squares turned into wastelands. New houses were built on them. Peter tested this technology in Voronezh. He observed how it works, fine-tuned the processes, determined how many workers were needed, how much material, how much time, and identified the problems that arose. Let's take the Assumption Cathedral in Voronezh. It was officially built at the end of the 16th century. A wooden church by the riverbank. Later it was rebuilt in stone. A beautiful building. But there is one detail. Its ground floor is buried in the ground. The windows are at the level of the modern road. The entrance is below the level of the square. We are told, the cultural layer, the earth has gradually built up. People did not clean up the trash, and over the centuries, several meters of soil have accumulated. In 100 years from the time of the temple's construction to the time of Peter, the ground has risen by 3 meters, 3 centimeters a year. Do you believe in this? Try not to remove trash from around your house for a year. How much will accumulate? At most 5 centimeters. And that's if nothing is taken out at all. Yet here, in the city center, it's 3 meters over a century. Moreover, the soil is dense, compacted. This is not trash. This is dirt, clay, sand. Such a layer does not appear from household waste. Such a layer emerges after a catastrophe, a flood, a mud flow, a mud wave that engulfs the city and leaves behind meters of sediment. Peter was not building Voronezh from scratch. He built on a buried city. The city already existed, with churches, with houses, with streets. Then a disaster occurred. The city was buried. Part of the buildings sank underground. Only those that stood on elevations survived. And Peter simply leveled the surface to the new ground level and started building anew. The buried buildings became the foundations for new constructions. Windows turned into basements. Doors became ventilation shafts. The technology is simple and effective. There's no need to waste time digging up old buildings. No need to clear debris. Just build on top. Fast, cheap, convenient. The main thing is that no one should remember what was there before. And Peter tested this technology in Voronezh. He observed how it works. He fine-tuned the processes. Then he applied it on a larger scale, in St. Petersburg. But there was one problem. There were witnesses remaining in Voronezh. People who remembered what the city was like before the catastrophe. The old folks who told children about the tall churches, about the streets that now lay underground, about how everything used to be. These witnesses needed to be eliminated, and the traces of their memory as well. When you enter the Pokrovskaya church in Voronezh, your gaze is immediately drawn to the frescoes on the walls. Biblical scenes, saints, angels, all according to the canon, almost all. Because on 2 frescoes, there is a depiction of the 6-pointed Star of David. In an Orthodox church. First reaction, so what? The Star of David is an ancient symbol that appears in various religions. Christians have used it too. That's what Wikipedia says. But let's take a look at the details. Frescoes in Orthodox churches from the 17th to 18th centuries were created according to strict canons. Each image had to be approved by a bishop. Every symbol had a clear theological justification. Improvisation was not permitted. The Star of David did not appear in Orthodox iconography of that time. This is a fact. You can verify it with any church symbolism reference. The 6-pointed star appeared in Christian churches much later, in the 19th century, when there was an active infiltration of Masonic symbols into religious architecture. So, these frescoes were not created during the construction of the church. They were added later, when the temple came under the control of other people. People for whom the Star of David held special significance. And this is not just in Voronezh. Look at the churches that were rebuilt in the 18th century across Russia. Strange symbols appear on the domes. On the walls, there are geometric ornaments that were not found in ancient Russian architecture. A compass and a square, an all-seeing eye, a pyramid with rays. This is not Christian symbolism. It is Masonic. It was methodically introduced into churches, disguised as decorative elements. And now recall how Peter the Great is depicted in ceremonial portraits. In Roman armor, with a laurel wreath, against a backdrop of ancient columns. Not a single Christian symbol, no cross, no icon, no church attributes. Officially, Peter was not a Freemason. No documents regarding his admission to a lodge have survived. However, all the symbolism of his reign is Masonic. The tricolor without a cross, the double-headed eagle with crowns and scepters, but lacking Orthodox symbolism. The Andrews flag, with its diagonal cross, is a symbol not of the church, but of the order. The table of ranks that Peter introduced in Russia was not simply copied from Denmark. It was copied from a system that the Freemasons implemented in Denmark after seizing power. The same hierarchy, the same names, the same principles of advancement and service, based not on origin, but on merit in front of the new system. Peter's reforms were not his initiative. They were the execution of a plan by those who were behind the Masonic movement in Europe, a plan to seize Russia and reformat it according to new standards. Who was behind this plan? Who were the clients? The answer becomes obvious when you look at what happened to the Russian dynasty after Peter. Peter dies in the year 1725. After him, the throne passes to his wife, Catherine I, then to his grandson, Peter II, next to his niece, Anna Ioannovna, then again to his granddaughter, Elizabeth, and finally to Peter III. Take any history textbook and trace the lineage. After Peter the Great, there are no direct male line descendants from the Romanov family on the Russian throne. The dynasty comes to an end. Instead, representatives of the German House of Holstein-Gottorp ascend to the throne. Karl Friedrich of Holstein-Gottorp becomes the father of Peter III, a German duke. His son, bearing a German name, becomes the Emperor of Russia. And after him, all Russian rulers are Holstein-Gottorps, but with the surname Romanov for cover. Officially, this is explained by marriages and family ties. Catherine I was Peter's second wife. Her daughter married the Duke of Holstein, and so on. Everything follows the rules of succession. But look at the name. Karl Friedrich Holstein-Gottorp. He is a German duke on the Russian throne. And Holstein is exactly the territory that Denmark seized in the year 1700. That very turning point. After the Holstein-Gottorp family seizes the Russian throne, all decrees and reforms are copied from Europe. The German language becomes the language of the court. German advisors fill all key positions. The Russian nobility is forced to change their surnames to the German style and speak German in order to advance their careers. And here it becomes clear why the capital was moved to Petersburg. Look at the capitals of former colonies: Colombo in Sri Lanka, Tokyo in Japan, Calcutta in India, Hong Kong, Singapore. All these cities are located by the sea. They are ports, places that are convenient for bringing troops and goods from the metropolis, places from where it is easy to control the captured territory. Capitals located within the country, at the center of the territory, are a sign of an independent state. Moscow, Delhi before the British, Beijing. Capitals on the coast are a sign of a colony. This is more convenient for the metropolis to keep its finger on the pulse. Russia has become a colony. In Voronezh, the heart of the old empire, was deliberately downgraded in status. The diocese left for good. The shipyards closed down. The admiralty was abolished. The city was slowly turned into a province, so that no one would remember that it was once the capital. Now we can outline the entire chain. The first step. A catastrophe buries cities under a flow of mud. Voronezh and dozens of other cities find themselves partially buried underground. The second step. The capture of the weakened cities. Peter captures Voronezh, Taganrog, and Azov. He does not build, he captures. The third step. The cleansing of memory. The reforms of 1700 erase everything that connected people to the past. A new calendar, new clothing, new customs. The fourth step. A change of dynasty. The Holstein-Gottorp family seizes the throne. Russia becomes a colony under the control of a German dynasty. The fifth step. The final destruction of all traces. And this fifth step took place in the year 1773. Spring, April, May, June. In 3 months, more than 20 major cities are burned down in Russia. Not villages, not settlements. Cities with stone buildings, with a population of thousands of people. Voronezh burns in May, Tver in April. Moscow partially burns in June. Kazan in May. Yaroslav, Kostroma, Nizhny Novgorod, all in the same period, dozens of cities, synchronously, almost simultaneously. Open the map of these fires. Mark the points where flames erupted. You'll see a line. It runs from the center of Russia to the outskirts, from Moscow through Voronezh to the south, from Moscow through Tver to the north, from Moscow through Kazan to the east, like waves radiating from the epicenter, as if someone methodically cleared the land, moving according to a predetermined plan. The official version is ridiculous. Each city has its own legend. In one, a cow knocked over a lamp. In another, a spark from a bonfire hit a roof. In a third, a child was playing with fire. And from that one spark, entire blocks of stone buildings are consumed. The fire spreads at such a speed that residents don't have time to grab their belongings. Steel melts and flows into the storm drains. Stone crumbles into sand. Take a regular lighter. Light a red brick. What happens? Nothing. The brick doesn't burn. It requires a temperature above 700 degrees to even char it. To melt the brickwork and turn it into a molten mass, temperatures above 1,000 degrees are needed. A regular fire produces a maximum of 700. Only special equipment or weapons can create such heat. But in Voronezh, after the fire, there were melted bricks left. Not charred, not cracked, melted, like wax under a candle. The stone flowed, the edges rounded. This is a temperature above 1,500 degrees. In Tver, after the fire, the church bells made of bronze and steel melted and flowed into puddles on the pavement. Bronze melts at temperatures above 1,000 degrees, steel at 1,500. What kind of wood produces such temperatures when burned? None. Even if you burn ship oak with the addition of resin, the temperature will not exceed 800 degrees. And the strangest thing is the nature of the fire's spread. Eyewitnesses describe the same phenomenon in all the cities. The flames did not ignite in a single location. They flared up simultaneously at different ends of the city. A fire broke out in one block. A minute later, in another, 3 streets away. Then in a third, on the opposite side. then in a fourth by the city gates. This is not an ordinary fire, where flames crawl from house to house, leaping across the street in strong winds. These are multiple points of ignition, synchronously, as if someone methodically set the city ablaze in dozens of places at once, or used a weapon capable of igniting everything all at once. And the speed. The fire in Voronezh started in the morning. By evening, the city was completely burned down in 10 hours. A stone city with wide streets, squares, a river that was supposed to serve as a natural barrier. Everything burned down in one day. Under normal conditions, a fire spreads at a speed of tens of meters per hour through wooden structures. It spreads even slower through stone. People have time to see the smoke, gather their belongings, evacuate, and organize firefighting efforts. There is time to bring in fire trucks and call neighbors for help. But here, people didn't have time for anything. Many died right in their homes. They went down to the basements for their belongings, and there the smoke caught up with them. They suffocated within minutes, not from the fire, from the smoke, which spread faster than the flames, like in a gas attack. After the fires, entire families were found dead in basements. The bodies were not burned, not scorched, just dead, as if poisoned. The official explanation? Carbon monoxide. But carbon monoxide acts slowly. It gradually sedates. A person has time to crawl out, scream, attract attention. Yet here, people died instantly, as from a toxic agent. This was not a series of random fires. This was the final stage of the operation. The eradication of the last traces of the old empire. What could not be cleansed earlier. Voronezh is burning in 1773. After this, the city definitively loses all significance. What was left of its former status is destroyed by fire. The shipyards are no longer restored. The diocese does not return. The city becomes a quiet province where nothing reminds of its past glory. But why was it necessary to so meticulously cleanse Voronezh? What was stored there? What traces needed to be erased at any cost? To answer this question, one must look at geography, not at the modern political map, but at a map of trade routes from the 17th century. Voronezh is located on the Don River. The Don flows into the Sea of Azov. From the Sea of Azov, there is an exit to the Black Sea through the Kerch Strait. And beyond that lies the Mediterranean, Constantinople, all of southern Europe. But this is just one direction. From Voronezh, it's just a stone's throw to the Volga, and the Volga is the route to the Caspian Sea, to Persia, to Central Asia, to the Silk Road. East of Voronezh lies the Urals, metals, ores, an industrial center. To the south, the Caucasus, mountain passes in Transcaucasia and beyond. Voronezh is a hub, the center of a web of trade routes. From here, the Don, Volga, Azov, Caspian, and Caucasus are controlled simultaneously. Whoever possesses Voronezh controls all southern trade. This is not just a convenient location for a city, it is a strategic point of control over a vast territory. That is why the capital was located here, not of the Moscow Kingdom, the capital of the Southern Empire, the one we are currently forbidden to name. And the fortress on the hill above Voronezh? It was officially built in the late 16th century as a watchpost. A wooden palisade on an earthen rampart. Nothing special. But look at the design of this fortress. It is a star-shaped bastion. The same geometry as in Taganrog. The same system of fortifications as in dozens of other cities around the world. These fortresses were built by one civilization, one engineering school, one technological paradigm. And the hill on which the fortress stood? It's too perfect, too symmetrical for a natural landscape. Geologists confirm it's man-made. Someone created this elevation specifically for the fortress. But the scale of the work suggests not a watchtower, but a capital citadel. Peter did not build Voronezh. He captured the capital of the Southern Trading Empire, an empire whose merchants spoke languages from the Baltic to Persia, whose engineers built fortresses according to the same blueprints from the Atlantic to the Urals, whose writing still emerges on old tombstones, which were hastily replaced after the year 1700. The fleet he was building in Voronezh was not for war with the Turks. It was for seizing the southern ports of that empire, Taganrog, Azov. Next on the list were supposed to be the ports on the Caspian Sea. But something went wrong. The operation had to be called off and moved north to St. Petersburg. Perhaps the resistance was stronger than expected. Maybe the catastrophe did not weaken the southern territories enough, and the inhabitants still remembered how things used to be. Perhaps time was needed to erase the memory of a generation that had witnessed the old world. Our history of the greatest empire has been stolen. An empire that controlled trade routes from north to south, from the Baltic to India. Voronezh was its capital, the center of governance, a hub where the threads of trade, politics, and culture converged. And this is not an exaggeration. Look at the scale. From Voronezh to Istanbul by water through the Don and the Black Sea, 2,000 kilometers. A month's journey on a trading vessel. From Voronezh to Astrakhan and then to Persia across the Caspian, also a month. From Voronezh to the Baltic through the Volga and river system, a month and a half. All the main trade arteries of Eurasia converged at one point, in Voronezh. Silk from China traveled through Persia, ascended the Caspian Sea to the Volga, was transported by overland routes to the Don and further into the Azov Sea. Spices from India followed the same path. Furs from Siberia were brought down the Volga to Voronezh and then spread south and west. Metals from the Urals followed the same route. Grain from the southern steppes was loaded in Voronezh and sent to the Mediterranean. This was the artery of civilization, the bloodstream of a trading empire. And we don't even remember it. In school textbooks, Voronezh is mentioned briefly, a provincial town where Peter once built a few ships for a campaign against the Turks. One paragraph for an entire chapter of history. That's it. Allegedly, the city has no other role. But the traces remain, and they scream the truth to those who know how to see. The hill where the fortress stood. Climb up to it. Look at the panorama. From here, you can see the river for dozens of kilometers in both directions. All approaches to the city are visible. This is a strategic height, a command post, a place from where the defense of not just one city, but an entire region was managed. And the hill itself is artificial. Geologists confirm this. It is made of fill soil, layer by layer. Each layer is compacted. It could not have occurred naturally. This is a grand engineering structure, a pyramid, but not made of stone, rather of earth. Star-shaped plan of the fortress, These bastions were built according to the same blueprints as the fortresses in Taganrog, Azov, throughout the southern region of Russia. Similar structures can even be found in Europe. One engineering school, one set of principles, one civilization stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. The Assumption Cathedral, with its first floor covered. Walk past it. Look at the windows. They are at ankle height. These used to be normal second-floor windows, and the first floor is underground, with rooms, vaults, doors. All of it buried beneath 3 meters of soil brought by the disaster. Street planning. Open the map of the old town center. Straight lines, perfect angles, squares of regular shape. This is not how Russian cities were built in the 17th century. Russian cities grew organically from the center to the outskirts, adapting to ravines and hills. But Voronezh is designed like Rome, like Paris, like the cities of an empire that understood geometry and engineering at a level unattainable for wooden Russia. Masonic symbols in temples. Step into the protection church. Look closely at the frescoes. There are 2 6-pointed Star of Davids on the walls of an Orthodox church. They were added later when the city was seized. These are markers, signs of the new masters. We were here. We control this. River names. Voronezh. Try to find a Slavic root in this word. You won't find one. Linguists attempt to derive it from crow or black. It's a stretch. This word belongs to another language, the language of the civilization that named this river hundreds of years ago. Don. It's also not Slavic. In Turkic languages, Don means water, river. But the Turks appeared here later. This means they adopted the name from those who lived here before them, from those whose civilization was erased. Voronezh remembers. The earth remembers every stone of the foundation beneath the asphalt, every buried basement under modern buildings, every structure built on the ruins of what once was. The stones remember the hands of those who shaped them, the masters who knew how to lay them without mortar, where the stones hold themselves in place under their own weight for centuries. The engineers who designed the arches so that they stand crack-free for 300 years. The river remembers the vessels that traversed it not by the dozens each year, but by the hundreds. Trade caravans carrying goods from all over the world, military galleys guarding the empire's borders, passenger ships transporting people between cities faster than land could with horses. The question remains whether we will remember. Do we have the courage to look at the official history and declare, "This is a lie. There was something else here, something great, and we have been deprived of the right to know about it"? The operation to cleanse the southern capital has been completed successfully. Voronezh has been turned into a province. The memory of its past has been erased. Documents have been destroyed. There are no witnesses left. New generations have grown up believing that there was never anything here, that the history of Russia began with Peter, that before him there was darkness and ignorance. But now you know. Now, when you visit Voronezh, you will see this city with new eyes. At the hill where the great fortress once stood, at the cathedral that has sunk into the earth, at the straight streets planned not by Russian architects, at the Don River carrying its waters to the sea along the same course as 300 years ago. History does not disappear. It can be rewritten in books, but it cannot be erased from stone, from the earth, from the landscape. The traces remain. One just needs to learn to read them.